Productions, the Cultural Preservation Station. Tune in. Tune in. Hey yo. Black education, cultural preservation, Taylor BTV, but cause elevation. Tune into the station, we rockin' the whole nation. That's right, we rockin' the whole nation, prepping new generation for mental activation. Taylor BTV's the new sensation. Stop the hesitation and learn something new. My girl Taylor B's here to show and prove. Terrorist shit.
Peace and bless. Welcome to Teller B TV Productions, the Cultural Preservation Station. I'm Teller B, and you're tuned in to B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E. If we don't, who will? Where Black education empowers, creating all unity, saving everything. Tonight, B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E. is back with a special show for you. We have our Hebrew scholars in the building, Kashub the Danite and the Mighty Hebrew. And they're going to be joining us tonight to talk about Hebrew Israelite, which I'm dubbing the origin story. So I'm very excited to have them on the program tonight. Again, all of you guys know that if you're tuning in the studio audience, you're a part of the show. You're a part of history. So please ask questions, interact with us during the show, and we'll be putting some of your comments up on the screen during the broadcast. So without further ado, let me bring our guest on. I'm going to bring Kashub the Danite on. Right now, Mighty Hebrew is not joining us this moment, so hopefully he's in Africa, so hopefully he'll be joining us soon. It's a major time difference, so hopefully he's getting himself together to join us. But without further ado, let me welcome Kashub the historian to the show. Welcome. Thank you for being back on the show for Black History Month.
Yeah, shalom. Giving honor and praise to the Most High. Thank you for having me on. Can I be heard?
You can be heard. Yes.
Okay. This is maybe the third time I've been on the platform I was on discussing my books with my lady Sarai on this platform. And some years ago, when I first was thinking about becoming an author and wrote a book called Egypt Talking Writing, I was on the platform then also with Mighty Hebrew. I've known Teller B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E. a little over 5 years. I've known Mighty Hebrew say a good over 5, 6 or so years actually in that particular matter as well. Not to get too personal, I understand that the brother did move. I give him props and respect for getting out of the United States. That's a move that many people are trying to make, even if it's not popularly known or popularly done in many, many cases. My lady and I have been to Egypt, and going to Egypt, there were some people that was from the United States already. We flew out of America. The plane took us over Greenland, then went south into Turkey. Then we stayed in Turkey for a layover, and then we flew into Egypt itself. And looking at the Mediterranean, a sea that I've been hearing about since I was a child, this is something that my biological cousins or so have gotten on my case about, saying you're always talking about Israel, you're always talking about history, you're always talking about this, that, and the third. Go and fly and see the places that you've been talking about, been promoting, been discussing. And I'm telling you, it's a beautiful sight, and it was a great thing to be over in that place. I encourage people to travel. Please do so.
Well, that was well said. Thank you so much for that. And it looks like the Mighty Hebrew has joined us. He's in the green room. Don't see him on screen. So let's see if we can get some audio from him. Mighty Hebrew, are you there? He is not ready yet. So we'll wait for him. He's in the green room. So he's getting ready. So let's.
Shalom.
Here he is. You're getting ready. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I know there's a huge time difference in Africa, so thank you, for being here. What time is it there?
Right now it's 5 minutes after 4.
4 a.m. Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
let's give him a little bit of time to get ready. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation ready so we can start sharing. So give me one moment to pull that together. Yeshaya, while I'm pulling that together, why don't you talk about your you and Queen Sarai's books and talk about where they can go pick those up at.
All right. Looking at it in this particular case, let me do this. As you can see here, it's called Hebrew for Couples. All right. Part one. Then Hebrew for Couples, part two. And of course, Hebrew for Couples, part three, How a Man and Woman Speak. Now, I want to show something in part one real quick. In looking at this, it goes over the alphabet and the vowel matters and so on. The other thing that I want to point out in Hebrew for Couples Part 1, which you can get on Amazon, is simple vocabulary of family members. Baby, boy, girl, and so forth and so on. So it gets into that. Real quick, what I want to show in Hebrew for Couples Part 2, how a man and woman speak. We want to go over this, just show this, that is, about vocabulary, about saying things like I answered, I was hungry, I ate, I was thirsty, I drank, I was full, I fell, I rose, I helped, I stood, I called, I came, I wanted, I planted, and so forth. So a lot of people speak, not to be arrogant, of himself or herself. So one of the things real quick to point out in Hebrew, ani is how you say I or I am. And that's for the masculine or the feminine. And this one right here, Hebrew for Couples Part 3, right? What I went over in this is everything that was I this, I that was made into we this and we that. So these books are $10 each. You can get them on Amazon and the support will be appreciated. On the sidebar, this is my lady's book itself, and that is called Chronicles of a Black Woman's Soul in and Out of Time. And you can get this book also on Amazon, as well as Libris books and so forth and so on how to acquire this matter. Our contact info will be placed in the description.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. So, um, looks like Mighty Hebrew is 100% on the broadcast. So let's give Mighty Hebrew a moment to go ahead and introduce himself. And then we'll go ahead and get the presentation started.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Shalom, Tel Aviv, shalom. Kashub, how y'all feeling? How y'all feeling? Can y'all hear me
I'm
good?
well. How you doing?
Yeah, we can hear you. We're good. Thank you.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Giving all praise and honor to Yahweh, the supreme intelligent, powerful one of our forefathers, other than B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E, those striving for righteousness' sake. Shalom Aleichem. This the mighty Hebrew Prince Charlene Dean. I'm just glad to be here live and direct, East Africa, Tanzania. It's going on 4:10 in the morning. I just feel good to be on this show. Feel good to reunite with my brother. You know what I mean? Kashub, the damn night historian, is definitely an honor and a privilege. I've been watching your work over the years, your growth and development, reading all your material. Very, very good stuff. I can't wait to tonight. I can't wait to listen to your presentation. I'm happy for you. I see you got a beautiful lady in your life. I seen that you went to Egypt. I myself, I've been traveling. I'm stationed like in Tanzania. I done been so far to Uganda. I've been to Kenya. Um, I've been to Somalia. Um, man, Zanzibar, Tanzania. You know, a couple other spots in Africa. Just building Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalism and building the Hebrew Israelite community over here of sovereign nationals that uphold Torah Constitution. So it's a slow pace, as they would say in Swahili, pole pole, but it's building. We have our own businesses. We have our own farmland. We raise up our own flock. We have goats, lambs, cows, chickens, roosters, you name it. Right now, my wife isn't here. She's at the restaurant nightclub / Dada's. So we take shifts. We go back and forth, overseeing. I might take a 12-hour. She take a 12-hour. My sister-in-law might take a 12-hour. So it's, it's pretty good. It's tough, but it's definitely making manifest at the Mighty Hebrew University, which is actually a accredited university. It dropped in 2015, but it just became accredited in 2021. You can go to tmhu.org to know more about me. You can go to www.themightyhebrew.com, but the actual university itself is tmhu.org. And it's real beautiful. We got the marginals, syllabus, everything. It's accredited university thanks to Pastor John Tatum out in Chicago that helped to get the university accredited. So I'm just definitely happy to be here. Maybe later on today we could show the progress. So I'm just happy to be here with my brother. I'm just waiting for his presentation, and I definitely add on with him. So I'm here.
So great. Thank you so much for that introduction. And yes, everyone, please go visit the mightyhebrewuniversity.org to learn more about that and all the wonderful work that the Mighty Hebrew is doing. The actual footwork, the grassroots up in East Africa, getting it in and making sure the word gets around. So to you, thank you for all the work you do, to both of you. So without further ado, let's start the presentation. So I'm just going to be the one controlling the slideshow. You guys know when you're on my platform, it's basically my house is your house. So I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation up here. Can you can see that okay, Yeshaya?
Unmuted.
Okay. There you
Yeah, I
go.
can
I
see it well.
unmute. You can see it well. Okay, so I'll go ahead and give you the floor, and you just let me know when you want me to advance.
All right. Before I do, giving honor and praise unto the Most High. I want to say this, having been to Egypt, and not to get too personal, me and my lady talking about traveling, and I met the Mighty Hebrew and you in PA. I'm from Brooklyn. There's a world, New Yorkers, outside of New York. There's a world, and I hate to have to put it like that. There are hoods outside of East New York, Flatbush. If y'all remember when we did that presentation about the people in history called the Phoenicians. If you remember, y'all was driving and we was in Philly, and I said, "Oh, we entering the hood." I could just pick up on the spirit, looking like this is okay. My point in mentioning that is there is a world outside of the block. Now, when you're dealing with, say, like Mighty Hebrew University or anything that's grassroots and things like that, I personally call it, there was the King Saul mine, and then there was the King David mine. While David never disrespected his predecessor at all, being that he was a Mashiach, an anointed one, Saul was anointed, he was a Messiah, being that that was also, if that wasn't enough, which it was, his father-in-law, because he married his daughter, even though him and his daughter didn't get along eventually, but that's still his father-in-law, and that's still the person that helped, quote, in layman terms, put you on when you was a child. So people can sit there and see you shine when you flew the giant's head off. My point in mentioning all of this, how it all ties up, is you never forget where you come from, and no matter where you're going. But always do know, not to be preachy, that there is a world outside of your own. And going and dealing with passports, dealing with putting things all in your nose, and then telling you ain't got something, and blah, blah, blah. It definitely was an eye-opener, and traveling is an eye-opener. The word for travel in Hebrew is the word nasa, nun samek ayin. All right? So just want to point that out. Now, getting into this PowerPoint, we're going to not piggyback because we don't deal with the swine in Israel. We're going to land back one with another in this particular case, giving honor to the creator of heaven and earth. This presentation has been a while some years since the brother Mighty Hebrew and myself came together to do a presentation. We hope and pray all is well, and we hope you all learn from this. Shalom. Next slide, please. Mighty Hebrew, feel free to comment when you care to. All right, here's the genre of what we're going to do. We're going to go over these slides, and it's going to get into history. It's going to get into why we say what we say. One of the things in the conscious community, they always try to bash Israel about, all those dudes cite is the Bible. Everything they cite is only the Bible. So what we wanted to do, being that our Bible, our Torah tells us that a matter is established by 2 or 3 witnesses, bring it up. Let's get the witnesses out. Let's sit there and carry the baton that Moses Farah, may the Most High bless his life and continue. That Kohen Mikael, may the Most High bless his life and continue. That Rudolph Windsor, may the Most High continue to bless his life and continue. Read those who are under 50. Let us carry the baton of those who are over 65, 70 years old, and let it not drop dead with that. The people who run the Jerusalem Chronicle, for those who are familiar with it, much shout out to them. You don't want it to be a thing in which you're no longer around your who you admire, who you respect, or anything like that, and just sit there and let it drop like that. You understand? It was Saul, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, Jehoash, Amaziah, Uzziah, Jotam, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah. Now, okay, most of them were wicked, but the point is, we're talking on the aspect of carrying a baton. Now, in this, while people saying Israelites only cite the Bible, let's get into this now and close out when we do. The Assyrian and Babylonian kings mention several of the kings of Israel and Judah in their records. Now, Assyria is not contested in history. Babylon is not contested in history. So once we can understand that you have external sources talking about you as Israel, that leads credence to your existence. And being that the Babylonian and the Assyrian story matches with the biblical story, it also leads to credence. And being that the biblical story speaks about Israelites losing to these people, who writes a story for generations later to sit there and talk about how they lost to somebody. When me and my lady was in Egypt, we asked the tour guide, no disrespect intended to her, because there was a debate between whether or not the king of the Hittites or Ramses won the battle. So I asked the tour guide, I said, who you think won? Well, Ramses did. But the Hittites said they won, and the Egyptians said they won in the same battle. So though nobody denied the existence of the Hittites, or that they at time in history had what you call beef, and so forth and so on, we have to sit back and ask who won it. Well, in the case with Israel, Israel said they lost to Babylon and they lost to Assyria. So it ain't too hard to figure out what it's talking about. Let's go on.
Absolutely.
List of those kings are follows: Ahab, Omri, Jehu, Menahem, Hosea, Pekah, Ahaz, Jehoiachin, and Manasseh. Now, Jehoiachin and Manasseh are kings of Judah or the southern kingdom. The Assyrian king Shalmaneser III mentions Ahab, king of Israel, in a war that the Bible doesn't even mention. Now, this is called the Battle of Qarqar, Q-A-R, Q-A-R. The Assyrians mention the Israelite king Ahabu-Suryala, or Ahab the Israelite, that the Book of Kings doesn't even record. So we want to point this out for reference purposes. Next part, please.
Can I and I would like to say something too, and that's a real good point. That's a real good point that you're saying, Kashub, because if you look at the Hittite inscription along with the Assyrian inscription about the same war, it's not questioned, because they both do actually say that they beat that war. So why isn't the Hittites being questioned as being authentic when it comes to Israel? So I'm glad that you pointed that out, Professor. Continue on.
Thank you, brother. The matter of Egypt in a short history. In ancient Egypt, there were 32 dynasties. Of the 32 dynasties, we see that the 15th, 16th, 22nd, 25th, 27th, 31st, and 32nd were ruled by those that were not natives of Kemet. The 15th and 16th, Hyksos. The 22nd, Puttites. The 25th, Cushites. The 27th and 31st were Persians. The 32nd were Greeks. Now let's get into this. Daniel chapter 9 in the Bible mentions Darius. Now, this Darius that it mentions is the cousin of Cyrus II. Darius the first mentioned in
That's
the
right.
book of in the Bible, chapter 9, was the king that ruled in Egypt in Dynasty 27. Dynasty 27 of Egypt, Darius I, was the cousin of Cyrus II. This is the same Cyrus who commissioned the Israelites in the book of Chronicles to go back and build the temple. So we can see how history ties up one with another. Now, this is, again, no disrespect intended. A lot of people, and this, I'm going to be raw on this. People say Egypt, Kemet, we got 32 dynasties. We did not, because the 32nd dynasty was not even, for the lack of a better word, black. That's the Ptolemies. That wasn't even, quote, melanated people. When me and my lady was in Egypt, we went into the museum, the new museum that they have. We seen the mummies of Ramses II, Hatshepsut. We seen the mummies of Queen Tayi, who was one of the rulers' wives that ruled in Dynasty 18. Queen Tayi's mummy, they did not allow us to take pictures, because I was about to snap, and them Arabs watch you like a hawk. Don't take no pictures. Okay. I swear that woman still look like she got her braids on, as old as it is. My point in these are Hamites, we're Israelites. My point in none of singing and all of that is two things. One, both my mother and father are gone. I would not want my mother or father shown as a display. That's just respect. But being that people do with kings and kingdoms and so forth and so on, right? How are you going to sit there and say that those images are people who's of Caucasians and so forth and so on, when you can obviously still see that their pictures in the pyramids is of color? My lady and I went into the pyramid of Marakare of Dynasty 4. Now, while her and I was in there, we didn't see any pictures of the pharaohs or anything inside of the pyramid there itself by Giza. You understand? But what we did see was the fact that the Arabs on the outside had black pictures of the pharaohs that they was trying to sell us. They knew, and they know how those two people looked. They would tell you, when we was with the tour guide, this is the Roman occupation, the Greek occupation, the Arab occupation. They show you that when each occupation came inside their own museums. So they don't sit there and say they're from the ancient ones, not the ones we was around, and so forth and so on, but they said that they're there for the moment. And so just want to point that out with that. Now, one more thing real quick to point out is the myths, M-I-T-H, when they start talking about sub-Saharan Africa. When you read inside the record of Meneptah of Dynasty 19, he talks about the Libu people. The Libu, L-I-B-U, is the Libyans. When you look at their pictures, they are black. And when I say black, don't take this the wrong way. I'm talking Wesley Snipes. So when they start talking sub-Saharan Africa, being that the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, and then the Turkish with the Ottomans, and all these other peoples came along later, they try to sit there and say that that part from Morocco all the way to Egypt was Arab or pale looking, and then everything from like the area of Mauritania down is black. No, it was all that. So we just want to point that out. Sub-Saharan Africa is a myth, just as much as the Middle East is a myth.
Get them.
Because you find the Fulani in the Gambia, and you find the Fulani people in modern Sudan. Next slide, please. And they're black. Thank you. The statement of Islam in the source. In the 6th to 12th century AD, we see that Islam was rife in the earth. We see that blacks were made to convert to Islam. Thus today, we see Muslims in Africa. Also, there are, as J.A. Rogers or Joel A. Rogers state, West Africa has black Jews also. He stated that in his book called 100 Amazing Facts about the Negro with complete proof. We see how there are Muslims in Africa, but what can we say of there being, quote, black Jews in Africa? Did the Jews do to blacks in Africa as the Muslims in Africa did to blacks? No. Every community from the Habesha to the so-called Falashas to the other communities such as those in Southern Africa, talking about the Limba people, the Igbo that was just quote-unquote recognized by the Europeans as being part of the Hebrew Israelites and so forth and so on, right? They were not influenced by Auschwitz and Jacobites going into Africa and converting. Those who do conversions in Africa was the Christians and the Muslims, not even the European Jewish people. So how then do you have, quote, Jews in Africa? Just a question. Next part, please. Thank you. The statement in the scholar's book. Now, if you notice, so far, I'm making a statement showing where I got the source, making a statement showing where the source came from. So how can we account for the records left by Mungo Park? He's mentioned in the book Hebrewisms of West Africa. Leo Scipio Africanus, he's mentioned in the book by Stephen Jacobs called Hebrew Heritage of Black Africa. J.A. Rogers, he's mentioned by Malcolm X back in the 1960s, and Nahum Schultz, among others, who say that the blacks fled from Israel, the land, during the Greek and Roman Empire and scattered into Western Northern Africa. How can you give an account of that without there having been an accurate record of such is what I'm asking. And that is why I cite the source of where I got my info from. Next part, please. Mighty Hebrew, please feel free to comment anytime. Tom Sheet. All right. The matter of historicity in the ancient nations. The ancient Canaanites made a plea to Akhenaten of Egypt and to send help to Jerusalem due to the Habiru who were attacking. The Amarna records, which was written during the time of Akhenaten of Dynasty 18, this was touched on recently by the brother Zion Lex on his platform. And what we want to point out in this particular case is that the Habiru mentioned inside of that, in part, were the Hebrews that the Bible speaks of, aka the Israelites, showing how the history intertwines. Let's go on, please. Thank you. Explaining that many who bash Hebrews are incorrect. Now, Egypt had provinces in other lands. Now, Egypt was conquered in 671 BCE, then again in 525 BCE, all right? Then in the time again with Persia in 538. Then we begin to see how this transition, if you're reading what we see right here. We're not going to read the entire thing. When you watch it later, you can pause it, expand it, and then read the notes in that particular case for time purposes. Esarhaddon of Assyria was the successor to Shalmaneser V of Assyria. Now, Esarhaddon mentioned King Manasseh of Judah in his own records of the Assyrians. All right? Now, the point in mentioning this is how can Israel be copycats of Egyptian history when other nations independent of Egypt and Israel, such as the Assyrians, speak of Egypt at one point and Israel at another point? What am I saying in this particular case? If the people of the Assyrians, independent of the Israelites and independent of the Egyptians, spoke of the Egyptians and the Israelites, and the stories between the Assyrians and the Bible correlate, how then can, as many in the said, I would like to say pseudo-conscious community, want to sit there and talk about, oh, those people were copycats of Egyptian culture? How do you have the Assyrians independent of both Israel and Egypt mentioning both nations and the stories correlate? See what happened, this is not a knock on Egypt or Kemet or Sematawi or Waset or Tamari. No, it's not that. Because like I said, me and my lady went there and we went to Egypt, was chilling in Cairo with a smile on our face, as you see in our pictures. So what one will point out is the pseudoscience that has been used to try to be minimalist of the Israelites in history is what we want to address. Get that out the way and then show what we're talking about. Thank you. Next slide. All right, now that we went into that, the Valongo Wharf. We black people, all right? Nobody ever said that there were no black people in the Western Hemisphere before the first slave ship came to the West in 1518. or 1506, depends upon what record you're reading. What we are saying, my indigenous and autonomous brothers and sisters, is the said African American did not make a treaty with you and break it. So if you claim this land in the West, that's yours. Turtle Island, as some people refer to it as. Your argument is not with the said African American. Your argument is with the people who you said was transported in the slave trade going east. You see how Tanzania and Ghana did a open door policy and you can come on in and feel at home back in Africa? If you feel that we was never in Africa at some state and that we are indigenous to this land, your argument is not with those who say we come from the east. It's the argument of the colonizers. The African American is not the colonizer of the Western Hemisphere. So we have to know how to place our fight and place our argument. The first nation to ever involve itself in the Atlantic slave trade was the Portuguese, then the Spaniards, Dutch, English, and French. We have to bear in mind that our people were taken from East and West Africa. Mozambique and Madagascar are in East Africa. Did you know that people from Mozambique and Madagascar was taken to Manhattan? Did you know that Wall Street was where they used to have black people sold, and it's called Wall Street for a reason? They lined black people on the wall. I want him and her. No, her and her, because you know what they were doing with the females, no disrespect. And him, because he can breed with her to get more pickaninnies for her. That's how they used to sit there and deal with us. The Valongo Wharf is in Brazil, and it's one of the few and only noted physical places of the Atlantic slave trade. 30% of the slave ships went to Brazil alone, many straight from Angola. This is how you get what they call capoeira. We're going to talk about that. Next slide, please. Again, Mighty Hebrew, feel free to comment anytime. The Europeans and the indigenous of the Western Hemisphere. While the Europeans were attempting to enslave or eliminate the tribes of this land, North America, if we will, such as the Shoshone of Idaho, the Micmac of Maine, the Dene, because there is no tribe called Navajo, that's people's truly called the Dene, of Utah and Colorado, the Apache of Texas, the Shasta of California, the Kootenai and Crow of Montana, the Kiowa of Kansas, the Washoe of Louisiana, the Chickasaw of Tennessee, the Seminole and Calusa of Florida, the Saponi and Pamlico of North Carolina, the Iroquois and Seneca of New York, the Shawnee of Ohio, the Wichita and Tawas of Oklahoma. Those are some of the tribes, okay? Among many other tribes of this land, the blacks were taken to the European countries of Ireland, Spain, and Portugal, and Italy to be made into slaves because they used to drop black people off in Naples during this Atlantic slave trade as well. Next part, please. The matter of Eldad the Danite. All right, now this is mentioned in the book From Babylon to Timbuktu. Hey, cite your sources. It don't make you a bad person, and it ain't taking your credit away if you cite your source. It means more so it makes you look well studied, as opposed to, I got all of this on my own. You're lying. You did not get all this on your own. All right? The historian Eldad the Danite of the 9th century AD stated that the Israelite tribes of Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher migrated to North Africa, who were later accompanied, all right, by Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and Simeon. Hebrew inscriptions were found that bore Hebrew names, such as Yoel, Yoash, Yoab. Now, in Algeria, when they bombed it during World War II, they wound up looking at their said catacombs and shown Hebrew inscriptions in there on walls from Egypt to Mauritania. Mauritania is the birthplace of the Mandingo tribe. Let's go in, people. The Moors also came from Mauritania. The Moors migrated to Morocco and by crossing the Strait of Gibraltar entered Spain in 711 AD. They were led by a man named Tariq, a Muslim by religion, but some historians say he's from the Israelite tribe of Simeon. So what are we saying is that the Moors, this is the basis in many cases, Moors is the name we have to ask, did they call themselves, or is that a byword like African American? And what we're saying is that the Israelite influence, like it says in the Bible, for Israelites who say they don't quote the scriptures enough, in the Bible, in Micah, the 6th chapter, It says that the remnant of Israel shall be among the nations like flowers among the watercourses. Meaning what? That wherever you're going to have a large gathering of where Israel did scatter, Israel will be there while they're still scattering, like you do your children when you're upset. You separate them in a corner. That's what the Most High did with the 12 tribes. So we just want to point that out for reason purposes.
And if I can, Professor, when you look at the whole story of Adad the Danite of the 9th century ACE, one of the arguments that you see people like Brother Garfield would say is that there are different interpretations of the story of Adad the Danite. But when you actually do the research, he clearly said that he's seen remnants of the 10 tribes of Israel in East Africa. Me, I'm over here studying certain lost tribes of Israel, such as the Wahabrani, the Wayahudi, and the locations in East Africa where Adad the Danite said that these tribes are located at. To this day, they're still here today. So that confirms Adad the Danite's travel and chronicles, and it's proven to be actually authentic. So that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to bring up that is a powerful source that you use, because the same exact location where Adad the Danite said that these Israelites will be in East Africa, today they're still there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I also want to point out that from this research that you're bringing forth through this presentation, you can just really see how the Israelites, are really. This is really the origin story. We are the origin story. We are the original nation, the originators, and I mean, it just really shows through all of this research that this is the tree. These are the roots to the tree. And from that, like you said, the flower petals are where they are. They'll be where Israel is where they'll be. Look at our impact on the world, and look at how far we are here, right?
Yeah, definitely respect it. If I'm going on and on,
Okay.
just
Oh
interrupt.
no.
It's all good. We're building.
No,
All right.
oh,
Yeah,
this
we're
is
building.
okay.
This
This
is
is
great.
I'm glad that this is going on. As a matter of fact, Telebi, I forgot to mention, my new album out, Mind Mental is Never Destroyed. Get that. We'll talk about that. And also, I just want to say this type of information has to be put out there from a scholastical level, because one of the statements within the Black conscious community is that Hebrew Israelites, we don't have any scholarship. And I'm saying to myself and even to them, like, there's some weapons out there, such as Kashub, the Danite historian, that people don't even know about. And when you listen to Kashub, and I've noticed many, many years, many of these scholars have actually ran from Kashub, the Danite, from Egypt talking, writing all the way to his new books. What is that? I got it in there. Assyria, the 10 tribes one. Oh man, that's banging how you break down. And I know you're going to speak on that briefly, but how you go into ancient times, even to the modern era, showing. I read the book like 4 or 5 times. I ain't even gonna lie. That's how good that book was. And you see that you can see the chronicles of Israel, the way that you have it broken down in chronological order. There's no way to distort the truth. So I'm definitely proud of you, proud of your research, and late debates that I've been winning. I ain't gonna lie, I've been using your research, man.
Thank the Most High. It's all good.
That's good, and
Yeah,
that's what it's
man.
there
Yeah,
for, and that's the
yeah.
whole thing. Like, and I can't believe that someone would say that there's no scholars, because between you, Kashub, you, the Mighty Hebrew, and Zion Lex, I mean, I don't think anybody could beat either three of you guys on any subject matter. I mean, the scholarship that I have seen come from the three of you has been nothing short but of amazing, and just the way you guys teach and the way you guys break things down is second to none. Everything that I've seen you guys do, whether it's a debate or you're just doing a presentation, you kill it, you smash it. You come with historical citations, as well as like biblical citations. So I mean, hats off to you guys. You guys are the best. So, you're like the top three.
Giving honor to the Most High for that. My first Israelite teacher, giving respect on the human level where it's due, was a later student of the late Rabbi Matthew. Rabbi Matthew helped start the Israelite congregation. That actually was still calling themselves Moors at the time. Commandment keepers out in Harlem, for those who do know. This is no disrespect. This is dated back to the 1920s. This is after the B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E congregation in the 1910 or whatever, or 1915 with Rabbi Ford. My Israelite teacher first was Mora Yosef out of Kashub in the Bronx. He taught my mother. Mora Yosef's teacher to my knowledge was a guy named Rabbi Yirmiyahu. Pointing all of that is everybody stemmed from someone else and got some influence from somebody else. And it was a woman named Imamatina. May these people I'm speaking of rest in peace. She told me years ago, dig into every kind of information that you can, from encyclopedias to dictionaries, to always try to bring out your information. That's what it is. I'm going to drop how I was able to get a bibliography in these kind of books later on. I'm going to give a clue on how, thank the Most High, within less than 6 years, the brother got 5 history books out. There's a tactic on what was done, thank the Most High. All right, so let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, the matter of over 5,000 miles. The first slave ship left from Spain. In 1440, the Portuguese set off the slave trade, which lasted until 1888. There were 448 years of transporting human cargoes from one place to another. The average number, given as 12 to 15 million, brought to the Western Hemisphere, is incorrect. There are over 7.5 million people in New York City alone. The slave trade was as north as Vermont to as south as Chile. And if you look at the map here, from Vermont to Chile, that's what I was showing, say, in that particular case. So all throughout South America, Central America, Latin America, the Caribbean islands, the Antilles, the Spanish America, because Florida is a Spanish word, and Texas was part of it. So you have to know from Spanish America before colonial America, and then the United States of America after colonial America, once it comes down into that, because they try to get slick talking about, oh, well, in 1619 and 1607. No, 1607 is when Virginia became a colony. But what in 1619, when people start talking about that date, what made that Dutch man okay in his spirit to bring 20 black people to him in Jamestown, Virginia, John Wolfe? Because they was already doing the slave trade. He didn't set it off. It was already done in action. So that's what we want to point out with that. Next slide, please. The Portuguese and their records. Now, in this book here, History of Slavery by Susan Everett, you can get that book online too. Knowing the fact that in 1891, the Portuguese destroyed their slave records. I got that from reading that book right there. To hide their guilt, we cannot accept their records as always authentic. The Portuguese destroyed in 1891 their records. And why do I talk about this, thinking the Most High? Because they want to minimalize what happened with us in slavery. They refer to it, correct me if I'm wrong, as the Tennessee Project. They were workers taken from Africa and brought to America. No. Just as much as the Torah talks about Israel as being captive in Egypt, we're going to leave a record showing what happened with our people. We're not going to sit there and let us leave this earth and our children get so caught up in games and things of that nature and sports and so forth and so on to where you forget what happened. Somebody's going to leave that record. If Anne Frank can be credited as a 9-year-old girl for what happened with the European Holocaust, then we are going to sit there and talk about us at our time too. They teach you about Anne Frank in her diary in high school. So we're going to talk about our story as well. You're not going to minimalize and downpress and say, oh, well, that really, it was this. No. Let's bring it out. Next slide. I'm sorry. Thanks. The matter from 1526 until 1853. All right, here we go. We're not going to read the whole thing with the stance of time, but you can enlarge it when it's posted. and see what it is. In 1526, blacks were brought to South Carolina to be made into slaves by the Spanish. Vasquez alone was that person. Then we're going to go into the end. In 1853, the slave trade was reinstated in North America when reports of uprisings and runaways flourished. Next slide for the space of time and whatnot. Thank you. The matter with the Stoner Rebellion. I want to state there's a book called Black Cargoes that I got the 1526 date. There is a book called From Slavery to Freedom by Franklin Moss that I got the 1853 date, so we can cite our sources. The Stoner Rebellion in 1739. The Stoner Rebellion, the largest slave insurrection in British North America, began nearby, on September 9, 1739. About 20 Africans raided the store near Wallace Creek, a branch of the Stoner River. So let's understand this. It goes on to say the rebels were joined by 40 to 60 more during their 15-mile march. So looking at that with the Stoner Rebellion, and what date is there? 1739. The United States didn't exist there. That didn't come to 1776. So slavery existed before the era of the United States, as shown in that plaque in South Carolina. See, there was a reason why we was made to not read. Next slide.
And to add on to what you were saying, you're absolutely correct. You're going to see when you talk about the 1619 date, that right there was talking about a Pacific group of people that came, by the way, from Africa to the Americas, but slavery itself was still going on. But 1619, we're going to get into that later if I have time with the information I sent to Teller B. You're going to see that date definitely plays a significant role within the redemption of our people coming from out of the lands of the great captivity today. But I'm listening. This is very excellent. Continue on, Professor.
Thank you, my brother. Honor to the Most High. The matter of them brought to Jamaica. This is another book written by Mavis Campbell called The Maroons of Jamaica. The native people of Jamaica were known as the Arawaks, who were conquered by the Spaniards in 1509. The Spaniards brought blacks from West Africa, meant to put T there, sorry, along the coast from Sierra Leone to Nigeria, the Ashantis, the Fantis, the Mendes, the Ibibios, etc. In 1655, the island of Jamaica was conquered by the English / the British. The English brought blacks from Ghana, Gambia, Liberia, Senegal, etc. The English made captives of the Ashantis, Fulanis, Mandingas, and Wolof. While the English and the Spanish were fighting, the blacks took to the mountains of St. Anne and Trelawney, etc. Now, when speaking about this kind of matter to people from the island of Jamaica, most already know what you're talking about in this particular case. But we want to point out that there were Maroons also in the said United States, in Mississippi and in Virginia. The Maroons of Jamaica are the ones who's popularized or talked about the most, but there were Maroons in other places, as we'll go on and close out. Thank you, my friend. Next slide. All right, the Maroons in picture, the matter in picture with the Maroons. No, go back to the picture real quick. I'm sorry. No, to the picture, the slide before this one. Right. Maroon War in Jamaica, and here we see the Trelawney matter. So this is what I wanted to show what was being spoken about, because you cannot separate the said African American and the West Indian. There's a book written by an elder by the name of Harris. And in that book, it speaks about George Washington trading black people as slaves between North America and Barbados. Barbados is the Portuguese word for beard, like the beard you grow on your face. So looking at it like that, we can begin to see how we winded up where we are in this case. We want to not let this history just drop to the floor and then we all sit there and singing happy songs together and so forth and so on. Frances Welsing, may she rest in peace, spoke about how, and this is no disrespect to Martin Luther King, because he said later on he feared he needed his people to burn in house. So he wasn't even following his dream because Coretta was black. So he being of black boys and white girls holding hands, he didn't believe in his own dream because his wife was black. First, secondly, getting right down into it, he changed up when he began to see certain things. And in Martin Luther King's last speech that was delivered in Memphis, Tennessee, April 3rd, 1968, he spoke of the Levites. The Levites were mentioned by Martin Luther King in the same speech when he said, I may not make it to the promised land, but you will be there. He spoke of the tribe of Levi in his speech. What is he telling the people? Next slide, please.
And also to
All right.
add real fast, notice that was in 1968, and right in 1969, you'll see former African Americans returning back to the promised land.
Kane, I remember I had Ben Ami's book. We can go to the next slide. I had Ben Ami's book. Thank you, right here. Called God, the Black Man and Truth. And I know that not long after Martin Luther King made that speech, that's where many people went and settled in the land of Israel. So let's go on.
And I also want to interject that after he made that speech, those things happened, and also, we know and realize that that's one of the main reasons why they wanted to get him out of here and why they did what they did, because he was switching off and, if you will, waking up from that dream and realizing, who we really were, and we really shouldn't be, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, what he wanted us to do, the integration. And he was waking up to that and kind of switching his tune, and then we see what happened to him, like happens to all of our great leaders.
Yeah, truth and understood.
Mm-hmm.
The matter of the Maroons in Brazil. In the 15th century, the Portuguese brought plenty of blacks to Brazil. The main ports were in Bahia, Pernambuco, and Rio de Janeiro, among others. The Maroons took to the mountains. The majority of the blacks in Brazil came from Angola. The Maroons in Brazil were called Quilombos, who fought the Portuguese almost literally tooth and nail. All right, so you can stop this on your own when this is uploaded, for the sake of timing and everything like that. But just want to talk about those who were in Brazil as well, because you don't want to forget that particular history. Next slide.
And there is,
So
and
before you,
there's a,
but
I'm
you know what
sorry,
I'm
go
saying,
ahead.
there's
My
a
bad.
high Israelite population that came from out of the Angola coast, by the way.
and before we go to the next slide, Kashub, could you touch on the capoeira? One of my girlfriends actually does capoeira, so can you touch on the history of that and real quick and
All right, to my
talk about
knowledge, I
how?
forgot what it's called in Angola, but what capoeira is, and I've seen it done. What they do is it looks like in the beginning that they're dancing or whatever like that, and then they start using a lot of times their feet, and they spin on their head, not trying to be funny or nothing like that. And it's used as a fighting style that was used against the Portuguese in slavery. You find that in many cases, in the movie called Quilombo, which actually starring what we just seen right here, Ganga Zumba and Zumbi, freedom fighters in Brazil. These people date back to like the 1600s. You understand? That was in Brazil or whatever like that. Now, this is just on the left side, so from the movie, but there's actually a statue in honor of the guy Zumbi dos Palmares. Now, we want to point this history out because you cannot marginalize our people's history to just the United States. All right, and this is no way, shape, form, or fashion trying to be offensive to anybody. But yes, as my lady wrote, it is a form of martial arts, and it is used, and it can be deadly if you really going into it like that, and so forth and so on. So I just want to point this out and show the evidence of what we were talking about. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. The matter with Haiti in the United States. In the 15th century, blacks were brought to Haiti in mass quantities. As early as 1501, blacks were seen in Haiti as slaves. In 1791 to 1803, the blacks in Haiti were led under a man to Saint Overture, became the first freed people in the Western Hemisphere. Did you know that a lot of the Black American or in the United States rebellions was triggered off from what they heard, what was going on inside of other places, like in Haiti? There was a man named Daddy Sharp. They called him Sharp in Jamaica. The same time frame that he did leading Igbo people in Jamaica to rebel against their enslavers is the same time frame that Nat Turner did what he did. People heard things, and Nat Turner was educated and knew how to read. You understand? So you can see why later on, all right, when Marcus Garvey came, may he rest in peace, passing away in like 1940 or so, why would they try to sit there and tell West Indians, for the lack of a better term, that Black Americans are lazy, and then tell Black Americans that people in the West Indies are witches? They're trying to sit there and separate the people from one another because they remember the behind beatings they got that was being brought to them from the Maroons in Jamaica, from the Maroons that we see listed over here. Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Gabriel Prosser, who said we are Israelites in Virginia in the year 1800, by the way, Denmark Vesey, Daga of Trinidad, Chamba and Paul Bogo in Jamaica. So my point is, me listing these things, I got that list after confirming it from a book called African People and European Holidays, which was written by an elder who taught in the college named Ishaka Musa Barashango. In that book, African People and European Holidays, he stated with evidence that Hebrew was going to be the national language of the United States. Atem Yod Im, Enehem Yokolim, Lanu Bidabel Ibrit Ze Amze. You know good and well they could not have us speaking Hebrew one with another. So these are just things to be pointed out. I've experienced. Why do you speak Hebrew? What do you mean, why do I speak? Don't ask me why do I speak. That's like asking a person who you think is a slave, why this nigga reading something. Don't do that. That's rude to ask somebody why somebody speaks or read. Real talk. Don't ever do that, people. All right.
And they obviously didn't want us to speak or read, so we couldn't communicate with one another, and realize what was going on, and so we couldn't, have an uprising and come together and go against it.
Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey all were married at one point or another, and they were definitely literate. Literacy is very important. They wanted to make sure, for what it's worth, when you read Roots by Alex Haley, right? He said in there that that Kunta was talking to his daughter and said, well, how come we're not allowed to read? And well, they figure the less we know, the less trouble we make. So looking at it like that, this is why you find, and I say this in no offense intended, look at what's going on. Black entertainment television, which we don't even own, correct me if I'm wrong, and now they want to sit there talking about bombing colleges and all this kind of stuff like that, about the Black colleges. And in Mississippi, not too long ago, they wanted to have it to where Black history is not taught. So don't ask us why we put our books out. Don't ask us why we go online and talk about this. We go harder because you go harder on it. Because you don't want it to be known. Then the argument comes, well, all those people were gone and they're dead. And okay, and I had nothing to do with what happened with your people kind of song. Well, if I'm talking about it and you ain't got nothing to do with it, then why are you in my business?
Dang.
If you are innocent, mind your business, handle your innocence, and let me speak my truth and my peace. Because what it is called making you have to sit back and see what you don't want to have to look at. Just as much as I might feel offended at 41 years old. Me and my lady was just talking about the working schedule. 30 years ago, I was a thief. When I was 11, 10, 9, 8, klepto like crazy. I'm going to keep the language clean. You understand? At 41, I work. I don't steal no more. But if somebody were to pull a receipt from 1990 and said, who you call Kashub stole from his mama, yeah, I'm going to feel offended. But that's my truth that I got to sit back and deal with, say, as a child. But when you don't want to recognize what happened and let's just keep it a certain way, nah, bring it out so that way we can all move forward and clear. But you don't want to, and that's the issue, and that's why we're going to keep on going beast mode. Next slide, please. Soda, thanks. The matter with the slave trade, as you see, coming from Eastern Africa, I think that's by you. I don't know how far Mozambique and Madagascar is from where you at in Tanzania, but as you can see, the slave trade that was going according to this map, and you get this from the book From Slavery to Freedom by Franklin Moss, 8th edition. So I just want to point that out. The United States had the least amount, and South America and the West Indies had the most that was done in that particular case. All right, next slide, thanks. All right, here we see it with the Arab matter on this part, and that which was brought over here to the Western Hemisphere. Now, speaking real quick about the United States, some of the two famous ports in the United States was Charleston, South Carolina, and Manhattan, New York City. Want to point that out. Charleston, South Carolina, and Manhattan, New York City, where you see the arrow being shown in that particular case. So just want to point this out for reasonable purposes. All right. In the book called Valley of the Dry Bones by Rudolph Windsor, he spoke of the Hebrew community in Angola. All right. So just want to point that out in that case. Next slide. Thank you so much. All right. Matters of Israelites in history. House of David. This is found in the 1990s. The Danite still, what you see pointed out, Beit Dawid or House of David. All right, that's what that is. With that dates to the 9th century BCE. So when people say, "Oh, well, do you happen to have anything before Herod?" You know, your Edomite hero, Herod. Yeah, we got matters before the matter of Herod. Then we see here, painted in the 1800s, Israel and Egypt. This is an artist's depiction of how Israel was looking inside of Egypt. Me and my lady seen the Pyramid of Giza. Next slide. All right, Hebrews of Lachish and me in Brooklyn. Now, the Hebrews of Lachish you see there on the left side. Me in Brooklyn, this is actually when the brother Hashar, the brother Daniela, Mighty Hebrew, and myself was at the store that Joel Benjamin has, and we was presenting a thing called the Smashing of the Synagogue of Satan. That was back in like 2016, and this is the slide, part of the slide that I was doing in this particular case. All right, so why do we show that part right there, thinking the Most High? Because brother's been putting that work in. We try not to come pseudo, have no problem, and I'm going to tell you this, I have made many typos in writing the books. So nobody is perfect, but be teachable and be willing to be approached, all right? Once it comes down in that particular case. Again, this is not no knock on Egypt. When people sit there and say, as you see in a picture, Ramses holding Asiatic and a Nubian and a Libyan in the picture there, because Israelites were not always perfect. So we want to point that out. When you talk about going back to the other slide, sorry, the one where we was just at, my bad. When we talk about 32 dynasties of Egypt, when you have a job resume, they say don't make it more than one page. The more dynasties in the society, the sloppier you look. So when you start talking about 32 dynasties, they don't look the best. Just the same. Israel had 11 dynasties. There's a reason why. Jealousy, people hating on people. I'm going to take your thing and then rule in your place and so forth and so on. So the European Jews who want to claim to be the people of Israel, we want to state, as I pointed out on another channel, FOPE, F-O-P-E, for our people's edification, with the elder Quanath. What I pointed out on there, thinking the Most High, is if you're claiming to be these people of Israel, you got to also claim to be the people went against the Most High. It says that the men of Judah dealt treacherously with the wife of their youth. F that. I ain't dealing with that. Oh, you just quick to leave her, huh? That kind of matter. So you got to sit there and deal with that. You got to sit there and deal with all of the things that the Bible talks about when in Jeremiah 5, it says, Ba'ami nimze'u risha'im. Among my people are found wicked men. So you can't claim this righteous priesthood and not acknowledge the fault on what happened. That's why we say Atlantic slave trade was prophesied, your Holocaust was not. You can't sit there and take, we're the Lion of Judah, and not recognize that that lion tore into his own self. It goes hand in hand. You got to accept both aspects. Next part, please. Lachish, by the way, is a place in Judah. All right, the Windward and West Coast lie along Africa's central Atlantic shoreline. Now, why did I go here? Because in this slave auction thing, to be sold on board the ship, Negroes just arrived from the Windward and Rice Coast. So when you say that there's no evidence of what's coming from Africa, talking about those are really Indians, no. It tells you where they came from in the same flyer. They're along the coast of Africa. It's not hard to figure out. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. A book I had since 1995 and what it says, written in 1888. Prosser, Turner, and Vesey were all able to read and all read the Bible. According to Edward Blyden in his book, Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race, we see the following. If the slave is not allowed to read the Bible, the sin rests upon the abolitionist. So the conscious community saying we were allowed to read the Bible, no, we wasn't. It dates back to here where it says, written in the 1880s, right? The sin rests upon the abolitionists, for they stand prepared to furnish them with the key to it, which would make it not a book of hope, love, and peace, but of despair, hatred, and blood. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes this, real quick. And much wisdom and understanding is much vexation and sorrow. If you take for what it's worth in the book Roots by Alex Haley, Kunta tells his daughter Kizzy, they don't want us to read because the less we know, the less trouble we make. So the more you begin to read and analyze and see things, the more you become a problem to them. Thus, as they call, not a Christian, but a demon. Next slide, please, because there was a reason why we was told to not be allowed to read. Thank you so much for your help. All right, the culture of promoting ignorance. Let's go in and then close out, all right? America speaks everything against the Most High. America has it illegal to teach, quote, the 10 Commandments. Now, let's look, all right? What does it say? Every assemblage of Negroes for the purpose of instruction in reading and writing shall be an unlawful assembly. Any justice may issue his warrant to any officer or other person requiring him to enter any place where such assemblage may be, and seize any Negro therein. And he or any other justice, a justice is a judge, may order such Negro to be punished with stripes. So any assemblage of Negroes that was made for the instruction of reading or writing shall be an unlawful assembly. That's in American law. That, brothers and sisters, was in the 1700s. In 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a Kentucky statute that had mandated every public school classroom have the 10 Commandments posted on its walls. The ruling came to prevent public schools from displaying the 10 Commandments year-round. So what are we saying? When I was in public high school, they used to have metal detectors. You didn't want the 10 Commandments of the Most High. Now you got Bloods and Crips, Latin Kings, this group and that group, because you don't want the laws of Yah. The other energy is going to come. Don't teach them the 10 Commandments. Don't do that. So now you got to sit there and have metal detectors inside of your school. So you pick your choice in that case. Now, we're not going to read this part for the sake of time, but it talks about people being flogged for teaching Black people how to read. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. The matter of the commandments found in the West. The Los Lunas inscription, also known as the Commandment Rock, is an abridged version of the Decalogue or 10 Commandments. Now, if this was found in North America by Albuquerque, and this is about the Ten Commandments, why would you not want this taught in school? Isn't that archaeology? Or do you want people like when I was in college to pay $641 for 3 credits to be told something that they can hope transfers to another school? Because one thing about college, and I'm a college pusher, know what syllabus you want, know what you want to do in it, because all your credits don't always transfer from one school to the next. They don't accept it all. So be circumspect with that and never take out a student loan. That's satanic. All right. So anything that could follow you to your death is satanic. The Bible talks about if somebody don't pay you back in 7 years, you drop your debt. So if somebody loaned you $18 and you don't pay it back in 7 years, that debt is now cleared. It's done. Move on in life. You may never want to loan that person again, but anything that you, like a student loan that follows you, you can't do chapter 7 or 11 to your death, is satanic. That's not helping anybody. So just want to point that out. So we found right here, brothers and sisters, the Decalogue inside of what they call the state of New Mexico of today. That means either Hebrews were here or they were those influenced by the Hebrews, because there's 2 things about the 10 Commandments to point out that the brother Zion Lex was talking about before. It says in English, I am the Lord thy God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So it's identifying who's the speaker and what the speaker did for the people being spoken to. Then it also says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Egypt doesn't have a Shabbat, a Sabbath. So therefore, looking upon it in that case, you can't say that it came from one or the other. The cultures are different. When you read every aspect of what they say is the principles of Ma'at, there is no Sabbath. There is no diet. And I know we talked about going to Egypt. I went there with my lady. We are Israel. They eat things in Egypt that is not of the laws of Musa, Musa being Moses. They eat camel in Egypt. That's a direct violation of the laws of Leviticus. They eat pork in Egypt. That is a direct violation of the laws of the prophet Moses. So just want to point that out. The cultures are different in ancient Egypt, not even talking about the thing with the 1641 date when the Arabs got there, AD. We're talking about the aspect, brothers and sisters, of ancient Egypt. They had no particular diet and the principles of Ma'at. Israel had a diet, so it's a definite different culture because you eat different. All right, next slide, please. Thanks.
Oh, mighty Hebrew, mighty Hebrew. I need you to close your Facebook tab if you want to speak, because it's causing feedback, and I think you have your Facebook tab open, and that's why it might be causing feedback. So
Now, off. I
there you
turned it
go.
off.
Now we can hear you clear. Yeah, yeah. You have to close any. I think I'm hearing it
Absolutely.
again.
Yeah, it's not. It's not on. It's not on.
Okay. There you go. Now you're clear.
Okay. What I wanted to say about the Los Lunas inscriptions in Los Lunas, New Mexico, and Hidden Mountain, this also shows the Triple Alliance when we was talking about in an earlier presentation with myself and Kashub, the Danite historian, that there was a Triple Alliance with Hyman, King of Tyre, Solomon, and Akhenaten. And you can clearly see that where they found the Los Lunas inscriptions, along with the Davenport Stellas, the Long Island inscriptions, etc., the Kentucky inscriptions, you can see that we came to the New World by the way of the Old World as colonies. This, because a lot of people will use the Los Lunas inscription to justify that the Native Americans are Israelites. But what it's really showing us is that Israelites had colonies in the United States as far as South America. Hallelujah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, my brother. Hallelujah. Next slide. Thank you. We're going to conclude soon. All right. Introduction to the second part in the book my lady wrote. All right. For those who do know, been following the channel, I have a beautiful woman in my life, and she, like me, is an author, and I want to promote her book. It's about poetry. Some of them are sad, some of them are laughable, but none of it is fake. All right. So, you can get this book on Amazon, Chronicles of a Black Woman's Soul. All right. And we intend to come out with more publications. Definitely do support the sister in her book. Thank you for that. And thank you for those who have already supported. All right. Thank you in that particular case. Next part. Thanks. All right. Summa and the ziggurat. Now, let's tie all this up here in the time allotted. Known as Sumeru in the Akkadian language, the place Sumer was famous for cities such as Kish, Napur, Lagos, Uruk, Eredu, Lhasa, and Umma. Now, the ziggurat is what you're seeing right here, and that was some of their work that was done. And they had a writing form that the Latins later on called cuneiform. It comes from the Latin word cuneus, which means wedge shape. All right, but we just want to point that out. And next slide. Thank you so much. Going from there, and we're going to show where we're going to end up in this case. The matter of Sumer and pottery. Now, you already know the southern kingdom of Judah was known for their pottery. All right, the scholars stated that the origins of Sumerian people can be found in the Indus Kush area. That's by modern day India, for those who want to sit there and point this out. True writing, appeared first in Sumerian city-states of Mesopotamia toward the end of the 4th century BCE and slightly later in Egypt. So what are we pointing out? You have Mesopotamia, which is from the Greek word meaning the land between the two rivers, the rivers being the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is in the land of the east. Next slide, please. The matter of Sumer and the citation. Again, we cite our sources. All right. Now, the ancient Sumerians were conquered by several peoples. The Guti, the Elamites. The Elamites is what the Assyrians, the Hebrews refer to as the Elamites. Elam, all right? The Assyrians ruled in the northern part of the Babylon and the southern part. So you can get a map and show where Syria was and where Babylon was, as we spoke about earlier. Before them, it was the Sumerians. All right, so we just want to point that out for reasonable purposes. The Sumerians are also known as the blackhead people for those who do the study upon that. Next slide, please. Thank you. The matter with Africans in history. According to Joseph Farris in his book, Africans in Their History, want to point out the things that are highlighted in bold. All right, Ethiopia, the term applied to the whole area and inhabitants south of Egypt. All right, so you can get that book again online. It's less than $20. All right, and so forth and so on. So you can get your citations up. People start talking about they want to rebuild their library. We don't want to just come off the top of our head. We want to show scholastically why we say what we say and how does it intertwine and connect with the biblical history of the Israelites, because you cannot separate the two. To do so, to say biblical history and then world history is like saying Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. You're playing games, because when you get right down into it, the geography mentioned in Genesis chapter 2, let's get into as we go along and show why we say what we're saying. Thank you. All right. The matter with Ethiopia and the citation. According to a favorite scholar, Ivan Sertima, may he rest in peace, right? In his book, African Presence in Early Europe, we see ancient Ethiopia was known as Kush, whether with a C or a K, right? Formed an empire in much the same location as the present-day country of the same name. Both the Roman Moire, pardon me if I mispronounce it, and the Greek Ethiope or Ethiop indicated more than one ethnic group. So when you read Before the Mayflower by Laurent Bennett Jr., we were called Africans and we were called Ethiopians by the Europeans during the slave trade. So before even Africa was colonized, it was even colonized by calling it a European word such as Ethiopia, which means the place of burnt faces, which can be from the Zulu to the Ashanti. One in Ghana, one by Johannesburg. Just want to point that out. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. Thank you for the timing. All right, Genesis chapter 2. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is that which compassed the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is which goes toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth is the Euphrates. How is Ethiopia mentioned along by Sumer in Genesis, but yet you don't understand, speaking in general, about the lands that the Bible talks about. You notice they mentioned the rivers. Did you know that you need water to survive and the importance of it? All great civilizations are around water. Hence, you see Manhattan being as big as it is, and it's surrounded by water. So just want to point that out. The ancient Egyptians built their greatest cities along the what they call the Nile Valley civilization and so forth and so on. So just want to point that out. Next slide. Thank you. Notes for those interested. All right. We're not going to read this whole thing with that, just point certain things out. The Atlantic Ocean was at one time called the Ethiopian Sea. You can look at old maps of Africa and be shown that. All right. Next slide, please. All right. The matter with the Chaldeans and the Ethiopians. Josephus says, some indeed of its names are utterly vanished away. Others of them being changed, and another sound given them, are hardly to be discovered. Yet a few which have kept their denominations entire. Time has or hurt the name Cush, for the Ethiopians over whom he reigned are even this day, both by themselves and by men in Asia, called Cushites. In Asia, called Cushites, because you had two Ethiopias that one of the black scholars in the back of the day confirmed. You had the Ethiopia or Kush that was in modern day India, and you had the Ethiopia or Kush that was in and still is in modern day East Africa of today. So we just want to point that out for reasonable purposes. And that's cited from the book of Josephus. We're citing our citations. Next slide, please. The matter with history and a scholar's book. Got to give credit again to Rudolph Windsor, who stated, all right, that what we was just talking about. All right. Next slide, please. All right. West Africa is a place basically situated west of Chad. Now, what do we want to point out in this is that from reading on the right-hand side, from A History of West African Kingdoms by Basil Davidson, we see that black people taken from Africa, picking a random date at 1800, as a captive may have roots going back to Ghana, Senegal, and Mali. Did you know that Langston Hughes was touched by one of the Ashanti women of back in the day and said that he came from there and then he began to cry? That happened with Langston Hughes, to be pointed out. Did you know that they do have an open door policy and welcome you and have land for you in places like the Brother Mighty Hebrew in Tanzania and in Ghana, where many people are going, because America is cold, not only in weather-wise, but I'm going to say this. In the Bible, it says whoever were to conquer the Canaanites will get the leader's daughters for wife. The guy who found Saddam Hussein, America's enemy, was in the Bronx looking for a job. So not only is America cold in winter, they're cold to their veterans. So there's a distinction with that. Let's go on to the next slide and close out, all right? Thank you for the time. All right, the matter with Ghana, Sisi or Sesi, and Mali. You can, in your own time, see that Ghana was a kingdom and so forth. Then you got Mali, and that kingdom spoken about there, and then go on to the next part. Thank you so much. All right, matter with Mali and Songhai and the citation. Songhai kingdom that started in the 8th century AD, and when Mali fell as an empire and became semi-independent states. I got that from the same book that we were just talking about, From Slavery to Freedom. So we show our citations without being in our feelings, saying, oh no, I'm going to just talk and then not state a verbal bibliography. Give respect where it's due. Next slide, please. All right, Sunny Ali, Askia the Great, Songhai, Ghana, and Mali. Now, Askia the Great was one of the richest people, and as you already know about Mansa Musa, spoken about in this, when you pause it on your own way, you could begin to see exactly what references we were talking about. But with the space of time, let's go on, please, to the next slide. Thank you. education in a matter of African kingdoms, then Moors and Spaniards. Under Askia the Great, education was promoted in places like Timbuktu, which does exist in Mali. Jene, Gayo, Walata became done what Yale and Harvard are to the Americans. So there was already universities in Western Africa before they was, say, in the Western Hemisphere. The concept and understanding of reading and writing and being educated is not a foreign concept. All right? So we just want to point that out for reasonable purposes. Next slide. All right, women in North Carolina speaking on where their ancestors came from. Pardon the language. A lot of niggas in slavery time worked so hard that they said they hated to see the sunrise in the morning. Slavery was a bad thing because some white folks didn't treat their niggas right. A slave testimony of Rhea Sorrell of North Carolina. In Deuteronomy 28:68, we read, in the morning thou shalt say, what Elohim it were even. And at even thou shalt say, what Elohim it was morning. So what we read in Deuteronomy 28, and then we can see what the elder, may she rest in peace, Rhea Sorrell stated in North Carolina, they hated to see the sunrise. In the morning, you shall say, what it were even. See the connection, prophetic wise, and so forth. Let's go on. My mammy Junie was a queen in Africa. They kidnapped her. No, I mean, go on and reading that. Sorry. My bad. My bad. Sorry about that. My mammy Junie was a queen in Africa. Then it goes on to say, our great grandmother was named Granny Flora. They stole her from Africa. Slave testimony from Ann Parker and Hannah Crasson. Now, these were slave testimonies in the 1930s. And they said that their grandparents came from out of Africa. So when they tell us, listen to your grandma, you an Indian, no. Grandma said her grandma came from Africa. This is why we want to cite our sources and what we're talking about. And yes, I do have Seminole in me from my great-grandmother on my maternal side. So I'm not trying to come off as that. What we are speaking about is we don't want it to be minimalized about what our ancestors went through. Next part, please. All right. All right. We're going to close out. Deuteronomy 28 in Egypt Talking Writing. You can get these books on Amazon. Next slide. From Assyria to America, part 1 and 2. You can get these books on Amazon. Next slide. All right. Israelite History and Me and My Queen. Israelite History as it relates to the world. You can get that book as shown right here on Amazon. All right. And that's a picture of me. I'm sorry, go back. Sorry, before we close out. That's a picture of me and my lady who helps inspire me, encourage me, and brothers, stop thinking there ain't no good sisters out there. I cited Susan Everett and other female authors. I'm going to say it. Don't be guilty like Judah was in the time of Malachi, saying they dealt treacherously with their wives. When I sit back and think of my mother, not to be sentimental, having 2 children, 2 different men, me and my sister being years apart, and what she went through, and now that I'm 41 and I'm on my own, so to speak, yeah, I got my lady in my life, but what I mean is like living on my own, paying my own way, and things of that kind of nature. And our mothers, in many cases, wasn't even asking for child support, nor was granted it. So what in the world made them to have the strength to be able to sit there and do and endure? We have to be, in closing out, giving honor to the Most High. Deuteronomy 24, for it says Israel. It says you're supposed to make your wife happy. Cheer up your wife. Cheer, simak in Hebrew, from samak. That's what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to be her best supporter, her best confidant, not part of her enemy list. When she thinking you ain't supposed to be like, damn, this nigga. No, that's not how that's supposed to go down. It's supposed to be like, my Malek, my king, my this, my that. That kind of spirit. We got to understand, closing out in Ezekiel chapter 20, when it says, hearken not to the ways of your forefathers. Many of our parents, grandparents, and things like that, while we talk about, quote, Black history, who were not the best, honor them and do better than they did. Shalom, I'm closing out.
Hallelujah. Yeah.
Wait, 587-4841, or the email YYISRAEL22 @ Yahoo for those who are interested in contacting. Shalom, Most High bless.
Thank you so much for that, Kashub. That was a great presentation. I want to give Mighty Hebrew a chance to say some things, and then give you a chance to say some things before we close out the show.
Thanks.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Giving all praise and honor to you, with the supreme, intelligent, powerful, one of our forefathers of B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E, those striving for righteousness. I say unto the family, Shalom Aleichem. This was a definitely powerful presentation. It was definitely much needed because, once again, a lot of people claim, mainly the Afrocentric Black conscious community, that Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationals, we don't have any type of intellectual scholarship, which has been proven tonight 100% false. Kashub, the Dana historian, has always shown and proved his scholastical foundation, which is sound. We showed slides, we showed sources, we showed the connection of the Israelite presence throughout Jamaica, throughout the Americas, throughout the Carolinas, and different other areas going into the Maroon. So we see that Hebrew Israelite connection. We even show connections from such speakers such as Martin Luther King. But I want to show y'all something real fast. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15 say that you need 2 to 3 witnesses. So I want to use a couple of witnesses real fast. In the piece that I have here called Black Hebrew Israelites on www.angelfire.com, I want to read a quotation that comes from Dr. Ben, which reads on this wise. It says, the history of Black Hebrews in North America is perhaps one of the most important chapters in U.S. history, which has yet to be fully written. The ancestors of African Americans came from West Africa during the era of slavery. That particular region of Africa was once home to a number of Black Hebrew tribes that migrated from North and East Africa over many centuries. And speaking of these migrations, Dr. Joseph A.A. Ben Yochanan writes, in North Africa, just before the period of Christianity's legal entry into Rome, due to Constantine the Great conversion in the 4th century, there were many Hebrew tribes that are of indigenous African so-called Negro origin. So we have Dr. Ben out of his own mouth, a well-respected Egyptologist, that is clearly saying that these Hebrews were indigenous Africans, and by the way, they are so-called Negroes. Continue on. These African Jews, as all other Romanized Africans of this era, were caught in a rebellion in Syrincia during 115 CE against Roman imperialism and colonialism. This rebellion also marked the beginning of a mass Hebrew, meaning Hebrew, migration southward into Sudan and West Africa along the way of the city of Air, and into the countries of Futa, Jalan, and Senegal or Senegambia, which lie below the parabolic curve of the Niger River's most northern reaches, where the city of Timbuktu, Mali, presently stand. That's an African origins of the major Western religions that was written in 1970, pages 75 and 76. Also, Dr. Ben goes on to relate that Black Israelite immigrants from Northern and East Africa merged with indigenous groups in West Africa to become the Fulanti of Futa, Jalan, Bornu, Kermit, and Lake Chad. They also formed the present stock of groups such as the Ashanti, the Hausa, the Bene Ephraim, and the Bavumbu. All of these groups suffered tremendous population decreases during the years of the transatlantic slave trade that was in operation. Others were completely eliminated. So we have one witness so far, right? We have Dr. Joseph A.A. Ben Yochanan, which is the granddaddy of Kemetic thought in the Afrocentric world. The next person I'm going to use is Dr. John Henrik Clarke. First, I'm going to read. Matter of fact, if you can tell her B, I'm going to inbox you real fast this link real quick. It's only like less than 60 seconds. What I want you to do is I want you to play this to the people so the people can hear out of Dr. John Henrik Clarke's own mouth. See, what we're using is their own scholars against them. We're using Afrocentric scholars who they love dearly, that they say that, yo, we not the Hebrews, this, that, the third, but what we're doing is we're using their master teachers, and we're going to see what they say out of their mouth. Is it okay if I send that to you?
Do you want to send it to me in the back chat?
Um,
If you go into your browser, there should be a private chat, and you can pop it right in that. Do you see it?
if I use this device, then I'm going to leave from off the podcast to get the link. Now I have another device where so I can send the link to you, or I could just play it and the people can hear it. But I would rather them actually seeing it. Can I send it to you inside your inbox? Is that possible? Or can I send
Yeah,
it to you?
Messenger.
Yes, in your messenger. Can I do that?
Same.
Okay, okay. So while I'm getting that, I want to read a quotation, two quotations from Dr. John Henrik Clarke before I have you play that. So in this book known as The Arab Conquest of Egypt in the Last 30 Years of the Roman Dominion, we see Dr. John Henrik Clarke saying out of his mouth, Roman exploitation, taxation, and ruthlessness caused a lot of the original Africans in North Africa to move further into the body of Africa. The question is often asked, what happened to North Africa's Black population? This is part of the answer, and this coincides with Kashub the Danite statement when he was saying that we are under the impression that what we see today in North Africa, we believe that these people are the original people of that land, but that's not the case. But the question that Dr. John Henrik Clarke is saying, well, what happened to these North Africans? Even though he doesn't mention by name in the Arab conquest of Egypt in the last 30 years of the Roman Dominion, he doesn't say the name. But if you go and cross-reference another book here is known as African World Revolution, Africans at the Crossroads on page 276, Dr. John Henrik Clarke says, there is a need now to study the migration of the Jews after 70 AD, when the Romans destroyed their temples and started the dispersal of the Jews of that day. Where indeed did they go? There is some evidence that some of them migrated south into the body of Africa. So now we have Dr. John Henrik Clarke saying that Israelites migrated into the body of Africa. Now that's what he wrote in his own books saying this. So now, Teller B, you should see within a few seconds this link that's going to come to you, and it's going to be Dr. John Henrik Clarke out of his own mouth saying these statements. So you have so far Dr. Yosef A.A. Ben Yokanayan, which is the granddaddy of modern day Kemetic Egyptian thought, saying that the Hebrews did go into West Africa, that the Hebrews amalgamated with indigenous populations that are Hebrews. Because one of the arguments with Rob Bourne, Dr. Reggie, they say that, you know, the Hebrews of Africa, West Africa, such as the Igbos and others, that they converse, but they can't give you the historical background to prove when our brothers and sisters converted. You see the link right there, Sister Teller B?
Hey, and I have the link. And let me know when you're ready for me to show it.
I'm ready right now. This is Dr. John Henrik Clarke out of his own mouth saying that Israelites migrated into Africa. Hallelujah. You look very serious, Teller B.
I'm getting the link ready. So give me 1 sec.
Believers. Now, after the Romans destroyed the last temple of the people of the Hebrew faith, 70 AD, now you got to watch it. You've got to study the migration patterns of the world. Where did those Western Asian people go? I see no migration pattern that took them into Europe. I do see a migration pattern that took a large number of them into inner West Africa, where a large number of people of the Hebrew faith lived in ancient Ghana, lived in peace up until 770 AD, when they tried to collaborate with the Arabs to take over the country, and the Africans expelled them from the country.
So you hear Dr. John Henrik Clarke out of his own mouth saying that Hebrews migrated into West Africa and in ancient Ghana, into areas in West Africa along with ancient Ghana, and that we lived in peace until there was some type of geopolitical disruptions that took place. But the whole point thus far, we have Dr. John Henrik Clarke saying that Hebrews went into West Africa. Remember, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15 say you need 2 to 3 witnesses, right? Oh, okay. So we got Dr. John Henrik Clarke saying that Hebrews went into West Africa. We got Dr. Ben saying that Hebrews went into West Africa. So right here, I have a book here known as Pre-Colonial Black Africa on page 233, written by Sheikh Anta Diop. So again, I use Dr. John Henrik Clarke, your Afrocentric scholar, right or wrong, Kashub. Did I not use Dr. Ben, their own Kemetic scholar, right? This is their people. We're not even using Hebrew scholars right now to prove our statement. Now I'm using Sheikh Anta Diop of Senegal, the one that wrote from Civilization to Barbarianism, the one that is the founder of Carbon Dating 14. Check it out. According to Tariq El-Fattah, an Israelite minority also lived in the bend of the Niger region in Timdarma and had made a speciality of cultivating vegetables, water with fresh well water instead of river water. Hold up. So Sheikh Anta Diop is quoting Tariq El-Fattah of 1652, who was a citizen in Timbuktu, recognizing that there were Israelites in Africa. This is 3 witnesses of your own people. You love Sheikh Anta Diop, you love Dr. John Henrik Clarke, and you love who is that? Dr. Yosef A.A. Ben Yochanan. They all said that Hebrews migrated into West Africa. All of them. Dr. Yosef A. Ben said that these Hebrews were indigenous Africans of Negro descent. That's what he said out of his mouth. Why are you debating people such as myself, Zion, Kashub the Danite, historian, Divine Prospect, JJ 7000, and many other scholars that's coming saying that the Hebrews did go into West Africa? Your own scholars said that. Let's go even deeper. Let's get deeper. Let's go to this book called Black Song, The Forge and the Flame, pages 31 to 32 by John Lavelle Jr. Listen to what this man says about when Europeans went into West Africa, what they seen. This is what they say out of their mouth. If the American white man fancies that he was the first to teach the Bible to his slave or his black slave, he is quite mistaken. Mongol Park, as affirmed by Marlon L. Stokely, found that Fantuma, the Kafa schoolmaster, had Arabic versions of the Pentateuch, the Psalms of David, and the book of Isaiah. The reason why they were in Arabic, because that was the language of diplomacy at the time during the Dark Ages, from the 5th century ACE to the 15th century ACE. Continue on. The unlearned, or the unlettered Mandinkas entertained. Now, remember earlier, Kashub the Danite mentioned the Mandinkas. He mentioned them. Watch. The unlettered Mandinkas entertained him with stories of Joseph and his brethren, Moses, David, and Solomon. The Mandinkas gave out the stories as part of their own folklore. Hold up. But I thought we didn't exist. But they gave the stories out to these Europeans as if it was their own folklore. Watch this. And were very much surprised to learn that white men had heard of them. Why would they be surprised if white men heard of them if the people of the scripture were white? That shows that the people of the scripture weren't white, because they were surprised that so-called white people knew about these people. Let's go on. If many slaves already knew a great deal of the Bible, the whole pattern of the origin and development of the background of the spirituals in America will have to be reconsidered, which is a historical fact. So Rob Bourne, Captain Cesariot, having an open live discussion last week about Harriet Tubman being an Israelite, and that the relatives of Harriet Tubman, they're all Israelites. All her relatives up to date, they just had a presentation. They started like 4 years ago expressing the oral traditions that Harriet Tubman, her brothers and sisters, all of them had of them being Israelites. And this was passed on. And that they came from a group of Hebrews within the Ashanti tribe. This is what they're saying out their mouth. But instead of Rob Bourne going to Harriet Tubman's family, he's arguing with Captain Cesaria about something that that Harriet Tubman's people say. Let's even go deeper. I want to give a couple more quotations. I want to go to Black Hebrews, The Quest for Authentic Identity in the Journal of Religious Thought, volume 44, number 2, pages 35 and 36. We're giving you the sources by Ellis Farah Yayi Jones, which reads, the appearance of Black Hebrew communities in the United States around the beginning of the 20th century is a particularly interesting phenomenon. Already in the early 1900s, Black preachers in the United States and the Caribbean were teaching that the so-called Negroes were actually the lost sheep of Israel. We are not dealing with mere Judaizing or forms of Judeo-Christianity, but with groups who, through their beliefs, practices, and lifestyle, consider themselves to be 100% Hebraic. What are you talking about? We have scholarship too. Just as you have your so-called scholars that can rebuttal, we can rebuttal too. Let's look at the mind state of the Nazi Holocaust. In this book that I have called Hitler's Black Victims, you see right here the Nazis look. I don't know if y'all can see this picture, but I'm gonna push it up so y'all can see it. If you look at this picture, the Nazis look at the so-called Jews that were acting that was dealing with jazz. They were saying that they were stealing the identity of the so-called Negro monkey, and that the Negro monkeys were in fact the true Jews or Israelites. And you see them with the shield of David. And it says, and I quote, the opera composer Joseph Snager branded or bragged that he used only Aryan talent as his protest against Jewish music and Negroes or nigger songs. Nazi organizations across the board attacked jazz on anti-Semitic grounds, referring to the Judean Negroid essence of jazz. This is how the Nazis viewed the so-called Jews as imitating Blacks who were in fact the original Israelites. That's what they were saying out of their mouths, the so-called Nazis. Also, I want to quote these last two quotations, and I'm done, because Kashub, he been in the coffin. It ain't really much that I have to say, because he already laid it down in the PowerPoint, and you can go look up these sources, what he said. So now, I want to first quote, before I quote Herman Neuden in the book, Black, White, and East Africa. We talk about historical documentations. I see you over there smiling, Teller B, because you love it when we We rip these people out the frame. I see you over there grinning from ear to ear.
You know
And
I
it's
do.
definitely a matter of fact, speaking of Ben-Ami, because brother Kashub the Danite spoke of Ben-Ami's book, God the Black Man in Truth, on page 14. He says, many of the descendants of Abraham followed Moses from Egypt, but some remained in Egypt while others migrated south and southward. Right now, we know this to be true because when you go into the Igbo information, from which Kashub the Danite historian already broke down, that the so-called Jews recognize the Igbos as Israelites. They believe that their ancestor Eri from either the tribe of Gad in the 46th chapter of B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E or Genesis is their ancestor, and that when the Exodus took place, that everybody that migrated to Israel, some of them went south and west and things of that nature. This is where the oral tradition of the Igbos come from. Let's continue on. Those migrating Hebrews explain why traces of Hebrew culture can be found throughout West, Central, and East Africa. Now, when you talk about the East African slave trade, the West African slave trade, and them same people, you got Hebrew tribes over here, such as the Chagai. You can clearly see that they phenol structure is us. 100% facts when you understand the Bantu expansion, that you had Israelites that migrated into East Africa and then in turn West Africa, talking about the Northern Kingdom of Israel, which is Northwest Africa. It's not the Americas. You're misquoting 2nd Ezra chapter 13 to justify that the Native Americans are Israelites when in fact they are hybrids. They don't have anything to do with us, even though you have Israelites in the midst of the Native Americans, but the 10 tribes of Israel migrated throughout Africa. That's why you can go into southern Nigeria right now amongst the Beni Ephraim tribes in southern Nigeria who have Taurus and parched and Aramaic, and they tell you their oral traditions migrating by the way of Israel through Yemen into West Africa. We even see that same migrational pattern amongst the Lumba when they migrated from the Levant or Israel to Sinai to South Africa. We see these same migrational patterns. And remember what Dr. John Henrik Clarke said out of his own mouth. What did he say? You have to study the migrational pattern of the nations of the earth. Did he not say that, Professor? Did not Dr. John Henrik Clarke tell them to study the migrational pattern? So why are you talking about, well, if you go to DNA or African ancestry and look at your DNA, knowing that they only do less than 1% of your DNA. Stop playing games with us. We can go to the same African ancestry. They'll tell you, oh, you're of Igbo descent. Go back 3 years later. Oh, now you're a Khan. Either I'm Igbo or I'm a Khan. Stop trying to play these games with us as if we don't know our origins. You have to study the migrational patterns of nations to find out the truth. So let me make these last two quotations. I'm in this book called, well, it's not a book, it's a magazine that came out in the 1970s known as The Black World. And this right here is the original Hebrew Israelite nation, an interview by Prince Asiel Ben Israel. Here it is right here, y'all. Okay, so y'all can see it. Okay, that was Prince Asiel Ben Israel, May 1975. Listen to what he say right here. Black World says, you mentioned when you talked about going back to Israel, back home, you said that you wanted to reclaim your language and your culture. What language would that be? So right now we're talking about the Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalistic issue right here. It has nothing to do with religion. This is what Prince Asiel says. That would be Hebrew, an African language. And again, showing you about language, we were in a West African country and we were asking various brothers. There were about 5 brothers, each from a various tribe. And we asked them, how would they say father in their tongue, their dialect, or their vernacular? And one would say, ah. The one would say, ah. The other one would say, ba. And in Hebrew, it's abba. So we found that not only there, but Ghana and East Africa. I was in Uganda. Now, this is the key, y'all, Uganda. I was in Uganda and met several of our brothers there. And one of the young men told me the Hebrew people that had come about 400 years ago, before they broke off diplomatic relations, up to this particular town. And they were interviewing all the people. And it is clearly stated that they are descendants from people in the northeastern part of Africa, and that they had kept all the ancient laws. Stop. Now, to back that up, in the book, White and Black in East Africa, page 248 by Herman Noyden, listen to what he says. Speaking of Uganda, to the west of Lake Victoria and northeast of the Virgin Congo, it has an organized native government with a tradition of 33 kings and a legendary line that traces back to King David. Come on, man. We have the international ambassador, the Prime Minister, Prince B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E Israel, in Uganda, in East Africa, throughout all these areas in Africa, finding and researching and connecting to lost tribes in Israel, confirming the fact of what Herman Noyden said in Black, White, in East Africa. Checkmate. So we see that we have eyewitness accounts from not Hebrew Israelites only, Prince B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E, who's a Hebrew Israelite, but I'm talking about the three witnesses, Dr. John Henry Clark, who you love dearly, right? Professor Sheikh Anti-Diop, right? Dr. Yosef A.A. Ben Yochanan. These are the three granddaddies in edifices, the cyclopean edifices of Afrocentric thought that's saying that the Israelites migrated into West Africa. So mix that, resurrect your founding leaders from out the grave and challenge them to a debate on Side TV. Challenge on Side TV, Jabari versus Dr. John Henry Clark. Shaka Akmos against Dr. Yosef A.A. Ben Yochanan. Rob Bourne against Professor Sheikh Anti-Diop. Why are you challenging us when it was your master teachers that said these things? Forget about what we saying. I want y'all to openly say to everybody, y'all master teachers were wrong. Because all your master teachers said it. And then we didn't even go out of the paradigm of them. You got Farrakhan saying, oh, I put my life on the line with the naked truth, saying that the black man in America is the true children of Israel. What about our Savior has arrived in 1974, where we got the late Honorable Elijah Muhammad saying that we the Israelites? Why did Malcolm X say in his autobiography that the most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught them in the Nation of Islam that the blacks in America were the Israelites? Why do we got Dr. Khaled, the late Dr. Khaled Muhammad, continuously saying over and over and over in live speaking presentations all throughout social media that we the Israelites? And not only that, why isn't it known to the world when Farrakhan reestablished the Nation of Islam in 1979, he went in 1978 with Dr. Khaled Muhammad to Israel with Prince Asiel Ben Israel to Dimona to get the blessings from Ben Ami to help them to start the second resurrection of the Nation of Islam? Y'all didn't know that Hebrews from Chicago were the original first bodyguards of of Farrakhan before he created what you seen, the new revived fruit of Islam, to watch over Farrakhan. This is a historical fact. As a matter of fact, the godson of Minister Louis Farrakhan is Prince Asiel's son, Crown Prince Yosef. You have to be in the mix of Israel to know this history. Just like the brother right here broke down his pedigree, his teachers. My teacher was Prince Kaz Ben Yisrael out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who in turn, his teacher was Elder B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E Ben Yisrael, who his elder was Elder Ariab, whose elder was Rabbi Matthews. So we see this chain of events going back to Rabbi Matthews. We sat under the well. We're not social media Israelites. We sat under the well of Israelite elders. I sat under the feet of Ben Ami. I sat under the feet of Prince Asiel. I sat under the feet of Nasi Eliashub and other Israelite elders, the late Shar Levi, the late Prince Kamul Ben Levi Ben Yisrael. We talking about real Hebrew Israelite scholars that will wipe out clean all y'all elder scholars. That's why y'all don't have these scholars on y'all show. Y'all want to have these paper thin, oh, I'm going to pick this One West, and this is nothing against One West, so let's make that clear. But they know what they're doing. Why, as of yet, they haven't had Kashub, the day and night historian, on there. Oh, you want to know why? Because Kashub on, I believe it was on not Do the Knowledge Radio. What was Debate Talk for You? And he was on Debate Talk for You. And bomb, who was that dude you debated again on Debate Talk for You? Who was that? Kashub that you bombed out?
Shalom, shalom. Giving honor to the Most High. On Debate Talk for You, one of the debate that I was on it. Honestly, don't take this the wrong way. Forgot the guy's name. But it was about. Honestly, I really did. But it's about Deuteronomy 28, and he was, to my knowledge, like the Christian persuasion. Not knocking on our people who are into Christianity, but he did a video on Debate Talk for You. And I got in touch with the brother Sal Showtime about him taking shots at Israelites. So I called Sal Showtime and I said, I would like to debate the guy about what he's saying about Deuteronomy 28 and what we say about it. He contacted me and said, do I really want to sit there and do such? What people may have not, and this is not to be arrogant, what people may have not realized is that, like you mentioned, your pedigree and so forth. It's not to be sentimental. My first teacher was my mother. So, of course, at this point, it becomes a thing of I'm going to defend what I know and understand. And then at the same token, be open-minded to hear this, that, and the third. What essentially winded up happening was when we did debate the matter, people commented on it and so forth. And I got the link. I actually remember that one. That was some years ago, but don't take this the wrong way. I actually forgot the guy's name. You mentioned, I usually don't talk about some of these people that be on these Dagger Squad, I'm in Raw Squad, whatever like that. But I remember distinctly in that the guy Garfield did call in and he wanted to ask me about Deuteronomy 28:52. Which I kind of knew where that kind of argument comes from, because it says, or within thy land. Not realizing Deuteronomy 28 also says, when Israel is out the land, all these curses shall pursue and overtake you. So what they try to do is marginalize the particular matter and so forth and so on. So, nah. And by the way, I want to give the brother Zion Lex a shout out for smashing on Sarnetta TV, the guys who want to say that the Oniya or the Aniya or the Aniyot in Deuteronomy 28 means mourning or lamentation and don't mean ships. You're not going to sit there and silence the house of Israel. Don't do that. Don't try that. So we're going to speak what we speak and bring it out to the people. I personally, real quick before I have to go, is I try to use Black History Month as a way to, being that our people's attention span is there, use that as a time to sit there and get out the info to the people. You know, hate to have to cut it short. We in the fourth kingdom, as we know. I gotta sit there and deal with the work overnight, so I gotta prepare for the graveyard shift as it's called. So I have to excuse myself, and I definitely appreciate the time to be on this channel and so forth. Toda, and thank you for such.
Toda, Kashub, thank you so much for the presentation and being on. And in the honor of time, Mighty Hebrew, thank you too. We do have to wrap the show up. It's going on into 2 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and hold on, Mighty Hebrew. Give me 1 second. We got to, I have to mute. We have to have one mic on at a time because I think there's some feedback coming from East Africa. Yeah, those channels are getting feedback all the way from East Africa. But so let's go ahead and wrap the show up because Yeshaya does have to go. It's the 2 hour mark. We hit our mark. But guys, please know that you guys are always welcome on this platform. Mighty Hebrew, let's set up a date so we can dig deeper into your PowerPoint. And what I want to say before we close out is everything that we talked about tonight just really came full circle. Yeshaya in the beginning talked about passing the baton and passing the baton of knowledge and history and not letting history just sit in the corner and go to waste. We need to pass it down. We need to let it be known, let the youth know who they are. The witnesses that you guys brought forth, Mighty Hebrew, you read three or more witnesses. Speaking of our origin, Hebrew Israelite origin, and also the citations, the external sources, the biblical sources, also the historical, the stelas, all those things culminated. There's no denying who we are. There's no denying this truth. So, people can have their opinions, but truth is truth and fact is fact, and it can't be changed. And with all these different sources, there's no way that you can dispute this. So I just want to thank you guys for all you do, for the scholarship that you bring forth. And thank you for always being a part of this platform and being here for Black History Month. So that being said, I'm going to please let everybody have a closing statement. I think Yeshai made his, but he can make another closing statement. Mighty Hebrew to make a closing statement, and then I'm going to close the show out with our outro. Okay, so go ahead, Yeshai. I'll let you go first because I know you got to run.
Shalom, giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. On a human level, giving due respect to my teachers, B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E, may he rest in peace. Cohen Lewy, may he rest in peace. Chief Simeon, may he rest in peace. Maury Mishael, may he rest in peace. Nasi Kamul, may he rest in peace. Imam Matina, may she rest in peace. And of course, without any negligence, Imam Nifla'a, my mother, may she rest in peace. This book here, Israelite history as it relates to the world. I suggest people get this book. It's available online. Shout out to the sister who did the cover, Fabaim Edits, who you can find Fabaim Edits on Facebook to get things like this done. And giving due respect to my lady, Sarah Michaela of the House of Judah, who supports, encourages, and pushes me to be better as a brother and as a man. And with that, I say Todah for the time. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom, Lashaya. And thank you so much. Have a great night. Mighty Hebrew, go ahead and give your closing statement.
Shalom, Bahashem, Yahuwah, Kodesh, Yisrael, giving all praise and honor to Yahuwah himself, the supreme, intelligent, powerful one of our forefathers, Abraham, B.E.E.C.A.U.S.E, and Yaakov. Yes, giving honor and praise to all those teachers that Kashub, the Danite historian, just said. My teacher, Prince Kaz ben Yisrael, Prince Asiel ben Yisrael, the late Adonai Rabbeinu ben Ami ben Yisrael HaMoshiach, Prince Dr. Shaliach, the late Prince Dr. Shaliach ben Yahuda, the School of the Prophets Institute in Des Moines, Israel, Northeastern Africa. And the list goes on and on, all the way back to, Prophet Cherry, Prophet William S. Crawley, all those that came before us striving for perfection to bring Israel from out of the triple stages of darkness and into the light of freedom, which now we see things like this taking place, Hebrew Israelites sovereign nationalism, the repatriation of Hebrew Israelites returning, fulfilling the prophecies of Isaiah chapter 11, 11, and 12. We are the second wave of Israelites migrating. The first wave was in Zechariah chapter 12, 7, when we've seen in 1967 that population of Israelites from the Chicago, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia area taking an initiative stand to say, you know what, Israel, Northeastern Africa is our land. We're going to go back to the land and start the process of building Yah's kingdom. Now we're in the second realm of Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 15, 18, that the Creator said that he has given us the land from the great river Egypt to the Euphrates. We know that the great river Egypt is the blue and white Nile, which goes back to Lake Victoria. And I'm sitting in the land of the promise right now, Tanzania, East Africa, which is a part of that promised land or the promised lands. So I just thank Yah for preserving my life, my family's life, along with yours, Teller B, along with Kashub. I'm so happy for Kashub that he met a beautiful sister. That sister, she compliments him. You know what I mean? I'm so happy, you know what I mean, because Kashub has very close ties to his Ima, and I'm so glad that there's a woman, not to say replacing his mother, but he needed that. And Man, he done wrote like 5, 6 books, and he just keep going and going and going. So that's my sister. I'm so glad that y'all are together, and you make my brother so happy. You know what I'm saying? And radiance that's coming from off his face. I'm just happy that you are there with him. Continue on the fight. Hebrew Israelite Sovereign nationalism has risen worldwide.
Freedom, justice, equality. What I'm gonna talk about. Freedom, what I'm gonna talk about. Justice, equality. Yeah. Freedom for you and for me.
But when I look at y'all, I see a law. When I look in the mirror, I see the law. Now the question is, what is our law going to do for his nation? What is the earth going to do for their nation? So if you want things to change, if you want things to become better, then you yourself must make these things what happen. All that is caused by you, not by something else. Stop thinking that something is going to cause something to happen. Stop thinking something is going to cause